Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I must confess I am really surprised to see so many people here when the keynote speech is on in another room. So you must be like me and stats addicts. So just to introduce myself, my name's Kevin. I'm one of the safety and training officers. And one of the core things that I do in my job is when you send in your incident reports, I'm the person that looks into them. And then at the end of the year and at various stages through the year, I'm the person that looks at the trends to try and identify what problems we've got that are coming up, and also then determine what action we need to take to try and prevent those incidents from reoccurring. And this has never been done before. We do this quite a lot with the instructor seminars, is that we actually present to the category system AFF instructors on what incidents we're having with students. We've been, for many years, talking to the tandem instructors about what incidents we've had with tandems, but we've never done it before with licensed skydivers. And the reason why I wanted to do this is actually, if you learn a little bit more about the statistics and the trends, then you yourself can help prevent them as well. So that's really the aim of this presentation, is to give you an idea about what those trends are, so that we can try and address them at source, at the people who are actually jumping them. As an advanced instructor, no talk with an advanced instructor is complete without parish notices on how to find the exit. So I presume if you're aware by now, in the event of a fire, just go through those doors there. Please follow me. And please, can we just check that our phones are on flight safe or silent, so we don't get disturbed through this talk by your Nokia ringtone. Hopefully we'll open this to the floor and we'll have some questions. Please be aware that these sessions are being filmed, and therefore if you've got questions, I can probably hear what you're saying, but the people at home watching this on YouTube later probably can't. So if you've got a question, please raise your hand and I'll get you a mic as soon as possible, so we can hear the question that you're asking. And with that in mind as well, please also be aware that these sessions are being filmed. Hopefully you've been told that before, so if you do wish to opt out, please let us know and we can make the suitable arrangements. So first of all, as we've just discussed, why is it important that we report? Well, the main reason why it's important that we report is that it's a condition of our insurance, and it's also a condition of our exposition with the Civil Aviation Authority, that we report the incidents that we have to them. And therefore that's why we encourage you as jumpers, if you have an incident, that you make that report to us as soon as possible. Now, the way that we make those reports has changed. So you will no doubt have been seeing this logo a lot. It's a radical change that we've made. We've got rid of the previous membership system, and we've implemented SkyVault. And one of the really good things, one of the really exciting things about SkyVault is the facility to make an incident report online. Now we've done away. Well, first of all, I should maybe ask, how many people in the room have filled in an incident report in the past? Now, those of you that haven't filled in incident reports probably don't know that actually previously, and this might surprise you to know, if you had an incident, you had to fill that in paper. Or if your PTO was really sophisticated, PDF, and send it off to us. And we'd have to transpose all that information into our spreadsheets that we use to analyse all of our incidents. Now, you fill it in on an online form. Where you access that form is through your PTO. So you need to go and see, ideally, your chief instructor, but certainly one of your senior instructors, and you access the forms through their portal. And you see all the forms that are listed on there that you fill in the event of an incident. Now, there are some subtle changes. Basically, the forms are exactly the same as the old-fashioned paper forms that we used to fill in, with a couple of things that we've changed. What you'll notice is particularly on the injury form, that we now categorise the injury in terms of severity, and we do that for two reasons. One, so it's easy for us to tell how severe that injury was, but also the severity of the injury determines the appropriateness of the response that we take following that particular incident. The other thing that we've added to all of the forms is we've added a section where you can talk about the likelihood that this incident is to reoccur. And you might think, why is that? Well, that's very deliberately next to a box that was always on the form, which talks about what you've done to try and prevent that incident from happening. And that's there deliberately to make it, because you wouldn't believe that people just fill in an incident report and they don't think about what they can do to stop that happening again in the future. So we've added that on there to inspire you to think about, well, actually, is this likely to reoccur? And if it is likely to reoccur, what action do I need to take as a jumper to try and help that, to try and prevent that from happening again in the future? The other thing that those two scales do is they enable us to determine the risk matrix, or how likely this incident is to reoccur, and what our response should be. So if any of you are familiar with filling in risk assessments, this is quite a common process. Any health and safety professionals in the room? Anybody familiar with a risk assessment? This is something you quite often see on risk assessments. And what we do is we take the data from the severity of the incident and we look at the likelihood of that happening again. And that tells us the risk level that's involved, and as I mentioned, the response. And that kicks out information here. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is my colleague Ryan Mancy, fellow safety and training officer that you met earlier. So what Ryan and I do is at the end of the year, and at various periods through the year, we look at all the incidents that we have, and that risk matrix flashes out some of the key incidents that we need to look at. The other thing that it does is when we're doing these talks at the Expo and the instructor training day, it highlights some of the incidents that perhaps we really need to discuss as part of our safety culture. So there's absolutely no point in reporting incidents if you're not actually going to do anything about it. And also a really critical component of an effective safety culture is actually to encourage people to think about the actions themselves as well. And so that's why we're doing this talk. It's the first time we've ever done this talk to licensed skydivers, so that you yourselves can start thinking about the actions you can take to prevent the incidents that we see on a fairly regular basis. Now, incidents in skydiving, like other incidents, are preventable. Nearly all of them can be attributed to human error in some way, shape or form. So yes, the skydiver could have made a mistake that led to the incident. Someone packing the equipment might have made a mistake which led to a malfunction. A rigger might have made a mistake when they were assembling the equipment, which led to a failure in the equipment. Or a pilot might have made a mistake, which leads to a crash as well. Now, if we think about human error, and if we bear that fact in mind, all incidents down to human error are preventable. And we can prevent them by looking at what caused the error. And that's the main reason why we make incident reports. Because if we think about the causes of those errors, and we look at the trends of those incidents, and we put the two together, then we can develop strategies to prevent that. We can develop countermeasures. Now, there are various different countermeasures to help stop human error. Their recommendations, their regulations, their policies, their practices, and their procedures. They're the key countermeasures when you look at the causes of incident that we can make to prevent those errors from happening again. Now, naturally, we at British Skydiving, we can make countermeasures to try and prevent those, and we do those through policies. And those policies are set out in our operations manual. And so, for example, one of the key policies that we have in the operations manual might be opening heights for canopies. That's one of the key measures that we adopted, and we have actually recently reviewed it as a result of incidents to try and prevent incidents from occurring. Your chief instructor, or if you're on a team, your team leader, will develop procedures, SOPs. Who here has read the SOPs that they have at their PTO? So SOPs are another countermeasure that we have to try and prevent human error. But we can also look at practices. And coming back to the beginning of this presentation, this is why we're doing this presentation. Because you control the practices. By practices, we mean what you do on a regular basis. And by what you're doing on a regular basis, and I'm going to talk, this will make sense in a bit, what you're doing on a daily basis, the actions that you take are also countermeasures to preventing incidents from occurring. So just to put all of these stats into context, how many jumps did we do on a regular basis? So we've had a pretty poor year this year. I think universally we've seen that we've had some pretty poor weather. So the number of jumps that we've done is down on previous years. So we did nearly 250,000 jumps last year. This year we've done nearly 226,000 descents. So it's getting harder. I don't know about you, but I'm seeing less and less in my pay packet. Particularly working for British Skydiving, my pay packet's not particularly big in the beginning in the first place. So, but also the absolutely horrendous weather we had, particularly at the beginning of the year, I think has impacted on those stats. Just to give you an idea about where you sit in the whole pie of how many jumps that we do. So you represent about 70% of all of the jumps that are completed at British Skydiving Parachute Centres. And you did over 160,000 jumps in the UK. Like I said, you can see the trends there. The big dip at the bottom, 2020. What happened in 2020? COVID. So generally trends are down for jumps. But one thing that unfortunately is up is incident trends. And so there we can see a graph of the malfunctions in blue, the injuries in red, and off landings, and the total reports. So we're seeing a general uptick in incidents. And this is one thing, again, that's inspired our desire to do this talk, is we're going to talk about some of the key incidents to hopefully try and arrest this upward trend. Because if we're seeing an upward trend in incidents, but a downward trend in jumps, that means overall our incident rates are increasing. And that's something that we need to be concerned about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is licensed skydiver malfunctions or deployment problems. So they were up considerably, from 148 last year to 166 this year, which means our incident rate has gone from, okay, COVID, 1 in every 2,000 jumps then, but you see how we were regularly tracking over an incident every 1,000, 1,100 jumps, and that's now, I know it's a lower number, but the incident rate's gone up to every just below 1,000 jumps. So our incident rate has greatly increased. Now, when we're looking at incidents, we're going to divide this into incidents that occur that are related to the canopy and incidents that occur that are not related to the canopy, because canopy incidents are largely due to packing. And tension knots and twists are probably the leading cause of malfunction and deployment problems, which ultimately, as your packer will tell you, is largely down to your body position on opening. So the canopy problems that we have, you'll notice there, as we discussed, that the largest issue that we had or the biggest cause of malfunction last year was our friend, the spinning and diving twists. We also had a number of pilot chute in toes, some pack rotations as well, which is really quite disturbing. The other disturbing fact, I don't know if any of you were in a tandem presentation, but we see this in tandems as well. And our good friend, the line overs. So when we look at spinning, diving, twists, it's also useful to look at the canopy type. So are there any trends? Because there certainly is on tandems. Is there any trends with licensed skydiver jumps? And there you see that we have a lot of spinning, diving, twists on velocities, very high performance canopy. So a spinning, diving canopy on a spinning, diving canopy with a velocity is probably likely to be far more violent than any other canopy, so we'd expect that on velocities. We also see a lot of spinning, diving twists on crossfires and sabres. And I accept in there's plural, because I know there's a lot of versions of sabres and crossfires. I think both of them are up to version 3 at the moment, so I've added all of those in there as well. But equally, they're probably the most common canopies that we see, and that's data I can't give you because I don't know the number of jumps that people do on sabres or crossfires, but I think anecdotally, how many people in here have got a sabre? Okay, how many people here have got a crossfire? Okay, crossfire I perhaps need to be concerned about because my quick straw poll tells me a lot of people jump sabres, not crossfires. So that's something that we need to be aware of. So spinning, diving canopies, or particularly spinning, diving twists are largely due to packing. So when we look that we're having a lot of incidents on those particular, or we're having a lot of spinning, diving malfunctions, we need to look at our packing. So how do we prevent that? So one thing that causes it is being under pressure and packing to get on that next load. So just be aware of the fact that you don't, maybe take that extra minute or two with your pack job. Don't rush it because you're more likely to induce a problem if you're rushing. Ensure, how many of you here pack for yourselves? How many use packers? Okay, so either do it yourself or, and particularly if you're using packers, I would suggest do this yourself. You should be periodically taking the twists out of your steering lines? How many of us here do it? Okay. How many of us here think we should do it more regularly than we actually do it already? Okay, me included as well. Because that's a major cause of malfunctions, particularly tension knots. And what else would you do? What would you suggest? Is there anything that you've heard that helps prevent spinning, diving, twists? Or what maybe did you do, what change did you make in your packing to prevent that a spinning, diving twist? John?
I did two things. I got the rigger to tighten up the sheaths for my steering toggles so my brake couldn't fire accidentally.
Yep, very good.
So that's something a rigger did. But in terms of packing, I changed the way I laid the risers down so that when I laid the risers by the side of the reserve, the rear riser with the toggle I now have uppermost, so it's not pinched in the bottom and have the toggle stick there. And that made a huge difference to my brake fire rate.
Excellent.
So they both of those things help.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
So not so much packing, but just maintaining your kit. So
Absolutely.
you need new lines on it, and you're just ignoring that for a while. That likelihood that things are going to go wrong.
Yeah, no, that's really good.
Surely wing loading is probably like a better factor than, say, the type of canopy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you track
Stop exposing things that I haven't looked at yet.
that?
But we do measure wing loading in it. Yeah, it's less of a factor than the actual canopy. They're sabres and crossfires of varying different sizes. Yeah, but an interesting point.
Just ensuring that the riser covers are completely closed. Sometimes they are prone to pop open. We have a few problem ones on our kit, and they just like to ping open when we're walking down, taking a walk on the plane. We get sat comfy, and they suddenly ping open. Just make sure that's an even.
Yeah, and if you've got resistance on one side and no resistance on the other, it's likely to cause twists. Excellent point.
This might sound a bit obvious, but I've genuinely just had someone looking at the way I'm packing and, giving me tips to improve it, because I learned when I passed my packing certificate and nobody ever looked at it ever again. So, just a matter of, am I flaking this right? Or when I lay it down, is my rig moving? Which then means that the lines are uneven when I put it in a cocoon or whatever you want to call it.
That's a fantastic point, because how many of us here, when we started packing, or how many of us here are now packing differently now than when we started packing? It's human nature to want to create shortcuts, because that's primeval. If we create shortcuts, then the kind of primeval instinct in us can then achieve food or make fire that much quicker than we did before.
Doing too much. So I had a chat a year or two ago with John LeBlanc from PD.
Yep.
And it was all about how many wraps do you put in on it? Far too much.
Yep.
Not designed to come out the bag that way, but it's been all right at that time, so I put another half twist, and by the time you've got down there, you've moved all the fabric of your canopy
the
around.
normalisation of deviance, just creating, perhaps doing too much, getting away with it, or maybe having the perception that it's helping, when actually in some cases it's doing worse. So that's a great point, is actually do some CPD. Look up some videos on John LeBlanc. He's got some excellent topics. There's some great videos on the PD website. I'm sure there is on the Gyro website. There certainly is on canopies like the Airwolf. Do some CPD, do some research into it. Right.
Yeah, I've got a Velocity, and I used to have this, not fairly regularly, but it used to happen, line twist, and it's diving like hell. I have chopped it a couple of times in the past, and also I've kicked out of it many times. What made a massive difference to not getting into line twists for me, because I very, very rarely have them anymore, and it was what I was doing as the canopy was opening. I was focusing on keeping my shoulders level to the horizon, watching out in front, and then as you get pulled up right, then look up, rather than looking up straight away, because then that can just cause mayhem. A big one was if you grab the risers, you don't want to grab them immediately anyway, but as you do, when you get pulled up right, it starts slowing down. You can grab the risers. What I was doing previously was like I'm trying to control what's happening by pulling on them. If you think about it, what causes a stall? Is it the speed you're going, or is it the angle of attack? it's the angle of attack. Now, as that canopy's opening, your brakes are already set. So the angle of attack as it's opening is already a bit flatter, and you start pulling risers, guess what? You can stall. If it starts going one way and you're trying to correct it as it's going, you stall one side of the canopy without realizing that you've stalled it. And what actually happens is it spins round. If you had left it and just gone with it, most of the time it's fine. So that's the trick. Is, you know, if you're on a swing in a park, some of you might have been some time ago, but and you twist the chains round, and then you can kick your way back round, that sort of thing. If you just sit on a swing and push those chains kind of apart, and then you try and turn around, but you can't, it's that. So instead of grabbing risers trying to pull them to control it, it's almost like if it starts to go one way, you're kind of holding them apart, like this. That made a massive difference.
Great. Ryan, could you run the mic to the back?
Yes, I certainly
I'll
can.
get you doing some work.
Yeah.
Sorry, just as you were saying this, I was reflecting on the slides where you were showing the type of canopies and the amount of twists.
Yep.
I think this is a pure speculation here, but if you think about it, sabers and crossfires are typically the type of canopies that people learn how to swoop on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that start probably around 150, 135.
Yeah, good point.
And the reality is, I think a lot of the coaching is around the technique about that, but probably doesn't really cover, right, you're now on a slightly more performant canopy. Maybe it's the same as the one that you were jumping before, but the size, especially from a 150 to a 135, for example, makes a huge difference to how aggressive this canopy is.
Yep.
I'm wondering if there's a point around maybe some of the canopy coaching should cover some of that a bit more, because otherwise jumpers are just, you know, they won't know any better until they experience it.
Great idea. Ryan, that's something for next year.
Absolutely.
Or this year. But I know there's at least one other person that shares that opinion as well, is as we downsize, or maybe as we change canopy types, you know, what to one person is twists that they could maybe kick out of and get off. To some with maybe different experience, it's a malfunction, and we're going to talk about that exact point in a couple of minutes. So the next thing I want to chat about is all the other malfunctions. So the causes of malfunction that were due to factors other than packing. Okay, some of this is arguable, and you'll notice there's two things that really stand out. The one big standout is the item lost in freefall or on opening. Guess what the most common item lost in freefall is? The GoPro, and it seems to be that particular brand. As well. We don't tend to see DJIs or what's it called, Instas and all the rest of it. It's nearly always a GoPro, maybe because that's a preeminent camera that people are using. However, the really big concern for us, and this is a trend actually that we've identified, or that has been identified to us, that's global. So Ryan and I have regular meetings with our counterparts at the USPA, the Australian Parachute Federation, the Canadian Federation, who am I missing? Belgium Federation, and this was addressed. This was brought up to us that we're actually seeing this all the way through Europe now. So one of the biggest causes of malfunction is someone not being able to pull. Now we might have the common misconception. Who do we think is that mostly? I mean, giving it away, you can probably tell by the colours on the graph. We tend to think that's students. It's not. It really isn't. They represent a pretty. In fact, I've not even included students on this graph. This is A license, B license, C license, and D license. And if you can see the kind of the legend at the bottom there, C license is blue, B license is the purple one. So that's quite disturbing. When we've looked into this, the main reason why people are unable to pull their canopy or pull their pilot chute is because they can't locate it. And usually this occurs in two scenarios. One, they're hiring kit. And two, brand new kit that they've just bought. And it's really exciting. So if we think about this as a group, what can we do to prevent this from happening? Has anybody got any ideas? I mean, there's some standouts, but just to have a sanity check, I'd like to find out if we as a community are doing what me and Ryan want to advocate.
So I think that the interesting thing is that often that would be going from a hacky to a tack top.
Yeah.
So just practicing on the ground, that's what I did at least when I got the tack top.
How much does practicing on the ground cost? It's
Yeah.
free, isn't it? Yeah.
One I had was
You've had one?
No.
Are you one of them?
I was talking to a less experienced skydiver, and they had just got a new kit and were kitting up for an 8-way. I was like, let's just do like keep it small, keep it simple, keep one big change, and it was just kind of getting that ethos of like it's just one jump that you're going to spend on your new kit to just feel how it works and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's an awful lot cheaper than having to pay for the repack or possibly brand new canopy or free bag. Anybody else? Did you have a comment?
Well, I was just thinking, I'm currently preparing for my BI course.
Excellent.
So I've been practicing
we'll
a
be
lot
seeing
of
you very soon.
kit fam lessons.
Yeah.
And, you know, students are briefed every time they change equipment.
You'd like to.
Why are we not doing that with licensed skydivers?
Yeah.
You know, we talked about the tuck tabs, you know, and I think it's just a bit normalized. Oh, yeah, I've got my license. And yeah, but really, you've never jumped this kind of kit before.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. But that's just a
Does the kit fit? Because fit has a massive thing to do with your ability to pull the canopy. And, you know, that brand new set of equipment, yes, it might be down to, you know, not doing practice pulls or not being familiar with the hacky versus a PUD. But it might not necessarily be brand new and be built for you. It might have been built for someone else. It might not fit you. And this is certainly something that we see with hire kit, is that people are hiring kit and nobody's checking that equipment, or certainly in some of these instances, nobody's checked whether that equipment fits them as well. So we've discussed some strategies there, is check the fit of your equipment, do practice pulls on the ground. What else could we do? Where else can we do practice pulls? In the air as well. So do practice pulls in the air. And to your point as well, is, you know, don't go out on the 11-way tracking jump in a brand new rig that you'd never jumped before. In your case, the 8-way jump, or don't do anything funky and new, or because that's also a trend. Is a number of those incidents occurred and they weren't solo. In fact, most of those incidents occurred on something other than a solo descent. And do some practice pulls in the air. So yes, do them on the ground, but in the air, your body position is completely different. And particularly due to the fit of the equipment as well, might lift slightly or change position. So do those practice pulls in the air as well. Anything else to discuss on that? John?
With regards to the feedback that you get on either the form or through the DZ,
Yeah.
in relation to hired kit, I've not hired kit for years, but I rather suspect if I went into Langer, say for instance,
Yeah.
and said I was a experienced jumper, would they actually look at me with the kit on and see whether I could actually go through and reach the pull?
Yeah.
So I suspect probably not. So
Yeah.
I may be wrong there.
Yeah.
But perhaps if the feedback to the DZs were, if you have got hire kit, which you are loaning out,
Yeah.
that part of the process of the sale of the hire kit to them for that jump
Yeah. Is to
would be
check the fit.
well, not only check the fit, but check to make sure that they can go through the process of the pull.
Yeah.
And reinforce what you just said there earlier.
So there's
It's
two
the
obvious
practice pulls.
countermeasures there, aren't there? So one of them is a procedures issue. You could put it in your SOPs, but who here is in charge of the SOPs at their PTO? So then we've got to look at practices. So you're absolutely right, John. And if that doesn't occur at a PTO that we go to, get someone to do it with you. You know, if you've got a friendly instructor, or even someone that's not an instructor, or, and to your point, if you're around a novice instructor and you see that they're hiring kit, and say to them, have you done, when you're doing a flight line check on them, have you done practice pulls on that? Okay, do you want to have a go? Shall we go do practice pulls on that equipment as well? So it's not always down to the policies that we enact. We could make a policy over it. and put it in the operations manual. And if there are loads of incidents, if this trend continues, that's exactly what we want to do. But we don't want to make more rules. We don't want to ban parachuting altogether. We'd actually, like to encourage people to kind of start policing themselves. The other disturbing trend that we had is we had 13 AAD fires last year. That is a considerable number, and that's much higher than we have seen in previous years. However, 4 of those fires occurred across 2 incidents on board an aeroplane in the descent. 1 was a misfire on the ground. 3 were life-saving fires, 2 with a student and 1 with a licensed skydiver. But the other key thing that we wanted to draw to your attention was that the number that fired, there were 5 occasions where the AADs fired during a malfunction or as the canopy was deploying. And in one of those cases, one of the jumpers had put an offset on their AAD. They'd increased their AAD firing height to 300 feet. How many people here have got an offset on their AAD, have bumped it up? So if I'd asked that question about 5, 6, 7 years ago, I don't think we'd find anybody in the room, do you think, Ryan, that put an offset on their AAD?
Mine up a couple hundred feet.
The other thing that we noticed, and this isn't bashing any particular brand, was there was also a correlation between the AAD fires and the brand of AAD as well. And what we found is that most of those AADs, or most of those instances where the AAD also fired, occurred on vigils. Does that mean vigils are not safe? Absolutely not. To your point exactly, John, as this is the case where you need to read the manual. So at what height does a cypress fire? Anybody in the room? 750 feet. What about a vigil? Should all know the answer to this, it's on there. 840 feet. But it doesn't actually fire at 840 feet. It fires at the point where it thinks it's about 840 feet. Because all those calculations that those clever people at Vigil and AirTech have done account for the fact that most of the skydives that we're going to be doing are going to be belly to earth. And therefore, there's going to be an area of disturbed air behind us, which we all know as the burble, and that's going to affect the air pressure that goes to the unit. So in Vigils, their firing height is actually 1,100 feet, because that's the height difference in height that they account for the burble that's going to be on your back. And Cyprus, I don't think, published that data. John, you probably know more than me. I haven't found it in the Cyprus manual.
They previously mentioned that your body position and tone affects the height it fires, as does your rate of descent as well.
Yeah.
It fires a little bit higher if you're going faster.
Yeah, exactly. So
I haven't seen them give exact figures.
no. So we don't know. I personally don't know. I need to perhaps go and have a chat with them about it. But it's quite clear in the manual that that's the firing height. And in fact, there is a warning in the manual that you must be under a fully, or you should intend to be under a fully deployed canopy at least 1,000 feet above the firing height of the AAD for exactly this reason. And therefore, if you're starting to have an offset on your AAD and increasing the firing height of your AAD, you might also want to think about increasing your pull height as well, so your canopy is open much higher. So in an emergency, you're less likely for your AAD to also fire at the same time as you're dealing with that particular emergency. But obviously other strategies are that our priority is to pull. Clearly have to stay altitude aware. We have to know the AAD as well. So how many people sat in the room knew that already? Or was that something new to them? Okay, so at least one person did. And the salient advice there. The other key piece of advice I want to give you, and this is something that we're starting to see, is not to delay your cutaway. Don't spend too much time fighting that cutaway. Oh, look at that. That's a slide I didn't know went in there. So the next thing I want to talk about is injuries as well. So we're doing okay with injuries. So injuries, our number of injuries are the same as they were last year. So the figure in blue is all of our injuries. The figure in red is what we categorise as a serious injury. So those categories that we had in our new form, so this would be a category 2, so broken more than one bone, or a category 3 where we've broken lots of bones. But sadly, we've seen a few instances where we've had life-changing injuries. We've had 2 of those, and sadly we had a fatality as well. And on our risk matrix, they were the figures that have really alarmed us, and they're going to be some of the things we're going to talk about just now. The leading cause of injury in skydiving is poor canopy control. But in some instances, we've had pre-existing medical conditions. We've had a number of instances that have been caused by shoulder dislocations. And in every single occurrence where there's a shoulder dislocation, someone's got a history, a prehistory of a shoulder dislocation. Now this is a trend that we've seen year on year with tandems. And it's not particularly serious, although it's a trend we can arrest on tandems through the medical and through information. But if someone dislocates their shoulder in freefall as a tandem student, tandem instructor can deal with that. But if you dislocate your shoulder in freefall, then we've got trouble here, because that also impacts, that was also one of the factors in your ability to pull your parachute as well. So just be aware of your pre-existing injuries. And if you have got histories of things, so we've read the medical certificate and we've self-declared. Can we legitimately self-declare on that medical certificate? Most of us here can, but some of us can't, but may be tempted. But please don't be tempted. Please, if you have a history of something in your medical history, please seek out Dr. Jake Hard, our medical advisor, and he can provide you with information on how you can carry on at skydiving safely. What we're going to do now is talk about 3 of those key incidents that appeared on our risk matrix. And unfortunately, we had a fatality last year, so I just want to warn people that we're going to talk about an incident that led to a fatality. The reason I want to make that warning is there might be some of you in this room that knew him and were friends with him, or maybe jumped at that particular DZ, or maybe uncomfortable with talking about fatal accidents. So sadly this year, 27th of April, we lost Sam Cornwell, who was doing a tandem video jump. So Sam boarded the aeroplane, climbed up to a height around about 15,000 feet, did an unremarkable, and for various sensitivities, I'm not going to show you the video, we have the video. I'll show you stills from the video. This is why I'm describing the incident rather than showing you the video. There was an uneventful tandem video. He pulled his parachute about 4,000, or went in for the pull about 4,200 feet. But when he opened his canopy, can you see on the left-hand brake there, he had a brake fire. As the canopy deployed with that brake fire, obviously one side of the canopy inflated before the other, and that put the canopy into a twist. Sam then proceeded to try and kick out of the twists, maybe using some of the techniques that Ryan discussed to try and get out of the twists. He spent 14 seconds trying to get out of the twists. During that time, he was trying to get out of the twists. You can see there how the twists are quite high on the risers. They migrated further and further and further and further and further down the risers. Now, did anybody see the safety bulletin that was relating to this particular fatality? Okay, one of the recommendations on that safety bulletin was talking about riser inserts. So you know what I mean by riser inserts. So the excess from your cutaway cables, as that comes through the loop, it goes up to your risers, and then you tuck it away in those riser channels. Now, most modern equipment have hard housings in those riser channels, but a lot of it doesn't, including student equipment. And what we think was one of the causes of this incident, and just to describe what happens further, Sam spent 14 seconds trying to kick out of the twists. He then spent a further 17 seconds trying to cut away. But for some reason, he was unable to cut away. And the reason why I say for some reason is because we are not entirely sure why he was unable to cut away, but he was unable to cut away. One of the reasons we suspect he was unable to cut away was because he had spent so long trying to kick out of the twists. Those twists had migrated down the risers, all the way down to those riser inserts, those riser channels, and were putting force on the cutaway cables. So it's possible that as he was trying to pull his cutaway pad, the twists were preventing the cutaway cables from being released from those channels and then being released from the 3-ring system. So when I say don't delay cutaway, this is why. You might have noticed who gets the digital version of the mag on the app. A few of you. Recent magazine article was a repurposing of an article that appeared in the USPA publication called Don't Delay Cutaway. And I'd recommend everybody go back and read that article. It's very deliberately in there because it was one of the findings from the inquiry into that fatality. So coming back to, maybe what we can do, we can have countermeasures to try and correct this. So one countermeasure might be that me and Ryan come up with a new rule in the operations manual, or your chief instructor comes up with a new rule in SOPs. But we as skydivers, we can maybe change our practices. And one of the practices we might be looking to change is when we get home tonight with our equipment, just have a look at your risers and see if you've got hard housing in your riser channels. Just a quick show of hands, how many people here know that they've got hard housing in their riser channels? How many people here are not sure? Okay, so maybe that's one thing to look at. It may or may not have been a factor, but we have what's the term used, John, it's a probable likely cause? I forget.
It's very possible.
There's
no way of saying for sure.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have the mic with it. So it's very possible, but there's no way for sure that we think that's the cause. The other factor was that he was jumping a camera jacket. And one of the things that we did is we went and we examined the interaction between his equipment and the camera jacket, and it was possible that the wings could go over the cutaway pad as well. So how many people here jump wings on camera kit? Not many. How many people are thinking about maybe going out and doing camera jumps? But one thing to think about is we all have a plan A, what's going to happen if everything goes well. I'm stealing this directly from your talk the other day. We all got a plan B. What's our plan B in most cases? Look, locate, cut, away, reserve. But have any of you got a plan C? So what might you do if you can't find your handles? So there's various different pieces of advice, and I'm going to invite you to talk about those. What we teach tandem instructors, if you can't find your handles, is to look up, bring your hands down the risers until you locate the 3 rings, come down your system, and you should be able to find your cutaway pad underneath your chest strap. Why do we tell people to look on a malfunction? Because sometimes the harness displaces. And another theory that we had is maybe in this instance, because it's a diving, spinning turn, the harness had shifted, so he's maybe trying to grab hold of the wrong part of his harness. Another piece of advice I've heard is if you can't locate your handles, locate your chest strap, run your hands along the chest strap, and the handles will be underneath your chest strap. Has anybody heard any other techniques for if you can't locate your handles? Ryan, anything to... You heard anything else? No? So
grab the risers and come down, or from underneath coming up, or go for the centre and move back.
Yeah, so lots of different techniques. So go home and chat about this. One of the things, the other trends that we're starting to see in skydiving is that Ryan and I know this because we've been skydiving for donkey's years. And many years ago, we used to go to the airfield, whether it was sunny or not, and we used to spend lots of time in a bar after we'd skydive, or if it was rainy, and we'd sit and we'd talk about this type of thing. How many people go to the bar after a jump now? How many people turn up to a PTO or a DZ if it's raining, and on the app it says we're not going to be skydiving today? But a few years ago, everybody would have put their hands up. So we're not talking about this stuff anymore. So one of the things that we're going to be doing, one of the policies that we're going to be enacting, is we're going to start encouraging people to do their reserve drills more in a suspended harness. When was the last time you did your reserve drills? Every jump, yeah? Most of us? Who does the reserve? Who touches their handles every jump? Yeah, nearly everybody. When was the last time we were in a hanging harness? Student days, safety day, you know, not very often. When was the last time we practiced our emergency procedures with an instructor? Safety day maybe, but probably not. So maybe take that away. Practice your emergency drills with an instructor, get in a hanging harness, or if your rig's going in for a repack, ask your friendly rigger or advanced packer if you can actually pull the handles, so that we're actually pulling the real handles as well, and maybe practice some of that stuff. Maybe practice closing your eyes, finding the chest strap and then finding your handles, or coming down from the risers. Obviously not on a jump. But the key thing from this one is don't delay cutaway. We tend to have a thing in our skydiving community for criticising people for cutting away, particularly on twists. I'm sure a lot of people are in the room are smiling. We need to stop doing that. One of the things that came out of the investigation was that Sam was prone to taking too long, trying to cut away twists. And one of his friends, an instructor, had said to him on numerous occasions, "You're taking far too long to get out of twists. You need to be making that decision a lot sooner." And this is maybe a practice we can adopt. Instead of taking the mick out of people for getting off something we thought was just high slider, you know, how many times have we heard that? Or you didn't get the brake lines off, didn't get the brakes off, it wasn't a malfunction. Instead of criticising or taking a mick out of people, we should be congratulating people for making that decision to cut away so early. Take care when you're packing, obviously, all the things we discussed. Practice your emergency procedures, ideally in the hanging harnesses. And discuss maybe any of those unusual scenarios with an instructor. And know your equipment. Go back tonight and just have a think about riser inserts in your riser channels. And if you haven't got them, maybe chat to your rigger about what it might take to put them in, or whether they themselves think that it's actually a risk or not. I'm conscious of the time, that it's 1:45, and this talk was supposed to finish at 1:45. So I'm quite happy for people to start heading off if they want to. But I've just got a couple more things to talk about. But what I'm going to guarantee you is you're going to have time to get out of here before the prize draw. Okay, you're still happy for me to continue. The other two incidents that we had that were of great concern to us and appeared really large and were flashing on our risk matrix were two instances of low turns. Sadly, low turns are still seriously injuring members. And after we made all the changes with everything we introduced with the new CT manual and all the regulations on canopy sizes and things like that, we saw injuries and incidents caused by low turns really start to drop off. But sadly, they're starting to peak up now. And we had two very serious injuries that occurred last year. One that resulted in life-changing injuries. The second one, we thought there was a very real chance of a fatality. We certainly thought there'd be life-changing injuries, but I'm happy to report the person is now up and walking and engaged in rehabilitation, but will probably not jump again. In this particular instance, this person here was training towards their CT4 qualification. So they had CT3, which enables them to do high-performance 90-degree turns. But they were moving onto 270s. They were doing absolutely everything correctly. They were under coaching. They were being coached by a Flight 1 coach of great renown. I have absolutely nothing to criticize about the amount of coaching that they had. They were regularly dedicating jumps to high-performance landings. But for some reason, and we don't know why, on this particular jump, they decided to make their turn at such a height or at such a time, there was just absolutely no time for the canopy to recover. Now, how many people here do high-performance landings? Okay, not many of you. So I may be preaching to the converted a little bit here, but I'm going to preach to the people that are all watching this at home. So in this particular instance, this jumper made a jump that was dedicated, a hop and pop, did a number of 270 turns to just judge the altitude that they'd lost. They'd done a number of jumps beforehand. Came on a base leg to enact their 270-degree turn, checked their altimeter, and they were at 440 feet. which is approximately the height I do 90 degree, in fact it's lower than I do 90 degree turns if I'm doing a high performance landing. He then does a stall surge, and at the end of the stall surge, he's about 360 feet. He then pulls down on the riser, does a 270 degree turn. He realizes he's low, so he attempts to pull out of the dive by pulling on his toggles. Sadly, as you can just see on the right-hand side of the picture, he drops the right-hand toggle. He realizes, and you can probably tell from this picture that he's quite low at this point, he realizes he's low, he realizes he's dropped the toggle, and he transitions to rear risers, but at such a height. I think, to be honest, he's far too low when he's begun this maneuver. And sadly, this resulted in life-changing injuries. And it's possible this person might never walk again. So coaching is important, absolutely. But so is making sure that you're always turning at the correct height, that your heights are absolutely dialed in, and you've got the sight picture correct. In a similar incident, this person was on board a lift and he was dispatching a group of students. It's a group of students that he trained the previous day and then done revision training for that morning. A group of 12 students got on board the aeroplane and it took off, but it went too windy for the students to jump, so they brought the aeroplane down. All the staff got on board. It was too windy for students. It wasn't too windy for licensed skydivers, so they went and did a hop and pop. If you could see the red roof to the bottom left of the picture, just below his altimeter, all the students are just congregating around that red roof that he's just done refresher training for, and then taken off the aeroplane because it was too windy. So he's now on his downwind leg at 440 feet. He makes a 90-degree turn to crosswind, where again he does a stall surge maneuver and then aggressively pulls down on his risers, on his right-hand riser. And again, we can see here he's still in the turn, but I think we've all got a sense of maybe how high he is in this particular turn. And he didn't have enough height to complete the maneuver, and he ended up with very serious injuries. But again, this is the instance I'm happy to report. He's up, he's walking, he's out of hospital. So what are the key learning points? Obviously, it sounds obvious, but beware of low turns. They are still hurting people. Must firmly grasp the toggles. That incident that we saw before wasn't an isolated incident. We've had 2 incidents this year where on a high performance turn, someone's dropped the steering toggle.
There was actually a third, but it was a Brit who went abroad, and it happened out there.
Yeah. So as we are grasping the steering toggles, what were we taught as students? Full hands in, grasp the steering toggles. How many people do you see flying with just 2 fingers? And I have to admit, I used to be one of those people. How many people do you see flying like this with an open palm? Okay, and I'm not saying they were factors in this particular incident, but it's a practice, coming back to countermeasures, it's a practice that if we recognise in ourselves or other people that we need to challenge. Practice recovery techniques, because you might find yourself low even if you're not intending to do a high performance maneuver. A recovery technique is a good way of pulling yourself out of a low turn, even if you've only done a 90-degree toggle turn. And if you don't know what a recovery technique is, go home and speak to a canopy coach, and they'll tell you how to do that. But if you're conducting high performance maneuvers, particularly for CT4, for CT3, when you're learning to do 90 degrees turn, you can only practice those when there's a CP coach present. But you don't have to on CT4. But I would strongly recommend that you always have oversight, and if you decide to bring your heights down on those high performance turns, do so only after consulting your coach. Okay, quite a few off landings, but we put this down to the culture that Ryan and I have created of encouraging people to report. And actually a number of these off landings were instances where there's lots of people landing off. So one was an 11-way tracking jump. They always land off. The other was a big way that ran in the wrong direction because the multi-plane load was running in towards the wind, and towards the sun, and the sun was in the pilot's eyes, so they decided to take the run in slightly off the line of sight with the sun, and a number of those landed off. But if you do land off, make sure you land in the right place. And there's a simple thing that you can do to avoid landing off into an area that's dangerous. This is something I learnt when I was learning to fly. So if I'm ever flying around and I need to land somewhere other than where I'm intending, this is what I do when I'm flying. And it should be the same thing that we do when we're skydivers if we're landing off. The first thing to assess is the area we're going to land off big enough for us to land into, particularly if you're jumping a high performance canopy where you might need a bit of a runway to land. Is the area a fairly regular shape? So what I mean by that, if it's a thin strip of grass, then you've got a big open field right next to it, whether it's a big round field or a big square shaped field, it's probably best to go into the square shaped field than the thin strip of grass. The surroundings. So this means the inner surroundings, the outer surroundings as well. Are the inner surroundings free from hazards? Is there anything in there that we're likely to hit? And then the outer surroundings, are there any big buildings or any big trees? Because particularly on a windy day, we're going to get turbulence over those trees, and that's something to consider. The other thing to consider on surroundings is how am I going to get out of that field or quarry? Is there gates? Are there great big fences around it, which mean I'm going to be stuck lugging my parachute over a load of barbed wire fence? Is there a gate? Can I land next to the gate so I can easily get out, or someone can come and get me? What about the surface? Is it a bowling green, which is perfect to land on, next to a field that's just been ploughed? And is there a slope? Who's landed on a slope before? Because we don't want that sinking feeling that as we're going down slope, we flare at the correct height, only the ground's coming away from us, and now we've fully flared and we're still 20 feet off the ground. Or opposite, we're landing up the slope, we flare and the ground comes rushing up to meet us very quickly. So in those instances, if there's a slope, ideally choose a field that doesn't have a slope, but if it does have a slope, land across it. Remember, landing into wind is the third of our priorities. The most important, level wing, hazard-free area. Cool. Has anybody got any questions or comments? We've got 2 minutes before we need to go to the prize draw. Anything you'd like to ask? John?
One very quick one in relation to the incident where there was a
Pop it a bit closer to you.
Incident where there's a fatality.
Yep.
Some people might not know what soft housings look like.
Yep.
If they don't, see the rigger.
Yep, excellent point. Yeah, great stuff. Now, I'm happy to stick around. I'm conscious of the fact people are leaving because it's prize draw. If you've got any other questions, any other comments, I'm happy to stick around and talk about it. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Please stay safe.